Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota podcast. My name is Mpho and I've got Tim Lace with me. We're here to talk about many things on this Monday. We've obviously today the Proteas Squad was announced, but this weekend we had fixtures in the CSA 4-day series, so we wanted to jump in on that first. But before we do anything, remember, please do follow us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, One World Sports Radio. Please do follow us at One World SR on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can tweet us at our own personal capacities. I'm Mpho Moreki. Tim is at Tim32_cricket. So please do support us and help. Let's grow this podcast going forward, because this is South Africa's #1 cricketing podcast. If you want to know what's happening in South African cricket, you come to us first. You don't go to anyone else. You come to us, and then you can go to everyone else, because we are here to give you all the information. And so much has happened. It's a Monday, really awesome. It's really easy to do a podcast on a Monday when information just flows. Presses have happened, information is out, and yeah, we didn't get a lot of cricket, but anyway, Tim, how are you doing?
Doing good, and all the merrier for our flood of news that we received this morning, which we will get into, I'm sure.
Before it would be remiss for me to speak about not speak about the T20 World Cup final. Why did England win, and why did everyone else lose?
Because it's T20 cricket, it's a slice of luck. There was a slice of luck involved, no doubt about it.
Pakistan had that Sam Curran became like the world's best bowler for like 2 weeks, three weeks in a tournament.
Yeah, it's I wasn't expecting that. But I think they just played the right kind of cricket. They played the right kind of cricket even when they found themselves in trouble. That was the key. They trusted the fundamentals of playing T20 cricket. At no time did they to play forward-thinking, attacking, taking chances, taking risks throughout that tournament, allowing their players to play with freedom, both with bat and ball, throughout that tournament, knowing that they had somebody like Stokes, who, if they really desperately needed it, was able to steady that ship.
Yeah. So, like, I look at it and I'm like, someone actually was like, well, Ben Stokes, he's the man of the moment, he's Mr. Clutch. But I was like, it's 138, Tim. And if you looked at the guys behind him, Sam Curran, Chris Wokes, Chris Jordan, this team bats until number 10. I thought that was necessarily the difference between them and everybody else, was that their bowling attack wasn't the best. It wasn't the best in the tournament, but somehow they knew this because they wanted batting. They wanted to be able to, even when you're down to number 10, figure out a way to manufacture a win somewhere, even though I don't know how Chris Jordan, I'm not a fan of Chris Jordan's batting ability, but I do know that he can actually strike the batting. And I thought that was the slight difference between them and everyone else. And the fact that they trusted their batting to chase everything, and also the fact that they just got, as you say, the slice of luck that Sam Curran all of a sudden became this immense wicket taker, and we're also playing in Australia, so their quicks actually still have a bit of a chance, even though they're not necessarily the best quicks on slower wickets. So that's how I thought, because I was like, actually, like, it's 138, you should chase it down. Just because Ben Stokes was the guy who actually did it, it's neither here nor there. For me, it was that India semi-final that told me everything I needed to know about England. It was that, they'll take you to 160, whatever it is, and that's what their bowling was. But from a batting perspective, it was that aggression at the top, as you say, and the ability to know that we bat until 10, and in that you can have the freedom. Whereas with other teams, they bat until 7, and so it's a little bit more be more responsible type of conversation. And so it's interesting, because obviously the criticism for like South Africa and India and everyone else is batters need to be more responsible. For England, it's okay, it's a bad day, everyone was aggressive, we're following the game plan, it just never worked out. And I think it's a different mindset in thinking, but they've changed the way in which we look at international cricket. It's just that I don't know if South Africa could ever give us a team with guys who can bat until number 10.
I think we could. I think we could. I think it's a mindset. I 100% think it is a mindset thing. You and I were on a podcast last week, and we talked about it. We talked about guys who have gone overseas. They've said that the overseas is different. They've said that the attitude of how they approach white ball cricket is different to how they do in South Africa. They've said it without being prompted. They've said it there is a huge difference in mindset and how you go about playing white ball cricket in specifically. There is a reason why they're number one in the world. Because that mindset is there from the day you make your debut at first class cricket in white ball cricket. It's there from the start, and it's there till you reach the national side.
And then, for instance, like Harry Brook coming into a World Cup final on the back of the injury to David Malan, and still having the ability to not be in your shell and to play your strokes and to keep on playing well. So that for me was something that was really impressed. And to think about it, England have two different coaches for test matches and limited overs cricket, but they're playing the same brand of cricket, which speaks to this change in English. And obviously we could say that it started with the director of cricket, and obviously they went with Trevor Bayliss, and then now they've obviously moved on to McCullum and who's that Australian man? Is it McDonald?
Matthew Mott.
Mott, yes. Oh, yes, because there's a construction company called Mott McDonald. So sorry, everyone. That's like my day job if you want to figure out what I actually do. But yeah, so but it's interesting that they have the same blueprint and they're reading everyone seems to be reading off the same hymn sheet. And I think if South Africa needed to look at something, we did this whole directive cricket to look at England, but we've come out on the other side with a team that I thought was the best team South Africa's ever taken to the World Cup. But still we kind of went back into, well, it's crunch time. Let's actually batten down the hatches and try to be more responsible rather than actually everybody just be more aggressive. And there is a little bit of responsibility in your aggression, obviously, and you saw the way in which Ben Stokes played yesterday. It started off slow and then it built up, and then everyone else, even in England, obviously Shaheen was bowling really well. But I feel sorry for Pakistan. I think they could have, oh my word, that 138 wasn't enough. And it speaks to the contrast of where the world was in terms of cricket, because I don't think any other team would have actually scored more than Pakistan. But where England are, to the point where in a World Cup final where everyone says bat first, they're like, actually, no, we want to chase. And India kind of had that in the middle of the last decade where they were just chasing everything in T20 cricket because they were that good in terms of the batting. But it comes with that was just because of form and who Virat Kohli was. Well, now Virat Kohli is not the Virat Kohli we know, and they found themselves in a little bit of trouble. But yeah, that's England. That's enough about the T20 World Cup. We'll probably talk about this a lot more. Actually, we won't, because we're not going to see a T20 match until probably the SA20. Maybe we might bring it up then. But yeah, cool. 4-day series results. So, Tim, we started our 4-day Division 1. Division 2's already started. Division 1 started this weekend. We spoke about our podcast. If you want to go check it out on a Friday or Thursday, we spoke about who needs a big 2 games to go to Australia. Little did we know that they were going to announce the squad on the Monday after the 4-day series. But anyway, that was nice. If you want to listen to it, because it kind of gives you a flavor of who the new guys coming in and what guys need to do. But the squad's been announced, but let's talk about the results, because that's quite interesting. There were 2 matches that were drawn, Tim. I'm going to put them up now. So Division 1, the Knights against the Northwest Dragons was drawn. So too the Titans versus Western Province, largely because of the amount of rain that's been falling on the Highveld. About 100 milliliters fell over the past week. It's ridiculous up here. It was really bad. Disappointing for all of us because we wanted to see. But here's some things. Obviously, Northwest only got only 1 innings. Grant Mokwena scoring a 78 not out. And Gerald Kutsia, who we're going to talk about later, also just getting the 1 wicket. Nothing to write home about there for the Knights. apart from Wesley Marshall's dismissal, because that looked bad, Tim.
Yeah, it did. It's not great for him, but I'm sure he'll want to correct that going into the next games.
No, true. Then the next one, obviously, was the Titans Western Province. We got a lot more cricket there. It actually was the game that I was watching and I was following. Kyle Verreynne looked really good at the crease for his 87. He batted really well. We spoke about Kyle in our podcast on Thursday, Tim. Province batting first in that game. Dan Khalim taking 3 wickets. But there was an interesting one that's actually not on the scorecard. Mihlalim Pongwana scored an 870. He started off quite slowly, but then he built up and he was batting quite well. He looks a capable all rounder. If you want to just start adding people into that all round mix, Tim, for Western Province, obviously the Titans really did struggle. Neil Brandt scored the 66. They were 140 for 6 when everything just fell up. Well, when it started raining, and then obviously Bjorn Hendricks 3 for 29. It's actually quite interesting. Bjorn's always just in these numbers. But what did you make of that game? Because I know you were following this one as a Province fan.
If the rain hadn't fallen, I think that would have been a win for Province, which would have been a huge boost. Which would have been a huge boost. Well, they had the Titans something like 50 for 5 until that partnership, until Brandt, battened down the anchors and played a typical Brandt innings. If I'm not mistaken, he was actually dropped on about 20. Sort of in the cover area, which would have been, it wouldn't have changed anything, but it would have changed the mood within the Province camp, at least until the rain fell. But Province could say that was a good day and a half of cricket. They got runs on the board, and they got a Titans strong batting lineup in all sorts of bother. Berger and Hendricks back in form, bowling fit, which is a huge bonus. They bowled well in those first couple of spells that they bowled. So even though it rained a lot, Province can say that they had a decent outing despite the rain.
Yes. Tim, Titans were 41 for 5. The batting card reads Neil Brandt, who opened the batting, 66 of 153. Dean Alga duck, Spanelo Makanya duck, Junior Dala duck, Tennis the Brain, who we're going to talk about later, 13 of 47. Javeshan Pillay duck, and Musa Nkosi Twala, 31 of 78. He was in that stand of was it 89 with Neil Brandt. So the rain probably causing the ball to do a little bit more at Centurion. But that's what it is. But we got a result in the fight in another game. The Warriors, who are in the bottom half of the table, and they'll be wanting to move up against the Rocks, who are sitting in fourth in the combined table, not just the 4-day series table. They need wins and wins against teams like the Rocks because we've only got 7 games, right? And they managed to pull it out largely because of the batting of Jordan Hermann. He scored a sensational 187. Not out. Was it 57? It looks like it's 57. Not out. In that game. And to chase down, I think it was 360 for the Warriors. It just came down to some obviously Yanaman Malan scoring 132. We're going to talk about him later. We spoke about him in the previous podcast. He anchored that with Stian Vincel, who scored 91. Stian actually went to 50 really quickly. And then he slowed down a little bit more. But then obviously in reply, the Warriors scored 162. The Rocks scored 332 in their first innings. Warriors replied with 161. Jordan Hermann opening the batting and scoring 44, as you can see there. And then Boland, 198, bowled out by Glenton Steeman, who took a 4. Steeman took a 5 in that first innings. And Sean von Berg was the high scorer with 51. Clyde Fortain, wicketkeeper batter, 47 there, kind of in that middle order. The top order kind of failed. And then the Warriors chasing down 370. Jordan Hermann, 187 of 281 not out. Vian Luba, 78. They had a 193-run partnership at the top. And then Lisiba Ngwepe got a 15. But Rudy Second, who was the wicketkeeper and the captain of the side, He scored a 50, Matthew Bretzko 28, batting at 4. Good win for the Warriors, who, again, on paper, they're not a team that you would put up against the best team, but they're like their coach. They know how to make things work and know how to eke out results and fight against these bigger teams. And this is a nice little. I'd call it an upset win because the Rocks are pretty much star-studded. And so, what did you make of that?
Well, if Province had managed to get the win against the Titans, that would have been a shock, in the same way that this was. Rocks were in charge pretty much from ball one for much of those 4 days. Even when the total was set, I can't remember exactly the run rate, but it was steep. They weren't in a position to just go for 1.5, 2 and over, and just bat out and they'll eventually get to the runs. They actually had to play progressive attacking cricket against the bowling attack that included Hardest Verloon and Sean van Berg. Now those two have got over 700 first-class wickets. We're talking 700 first-class wickets between the two of them. So that was a huge, huge thing for the Warriors to get the win there. Jordan Hermann, absolutely fantastic innings. Anything fractionally short, and you saw the talent there. You saw the talent. And then with the overpitched, he was well happy to play those cover drives, those photographic cover drives. He'd play the cover drive and he would hold the pose on at least two or three occasions.
And to a certain extent, I think, looking at that innings, we all saw the video that Werner put up. Werner, who is one of our fellow commentators on One World Sports Radio. He's also got his own YouTube channel. Please go check him out. You kind of saw that this kid's got the technique that we need for that higher level, and he proved it with that 187. I think being able to, Steve Waugh speaks about the short ball, that there were times in his career early on where he just left the short ball. He didn't want to play it because he just kept on getting him out. And so that's going to be quite interesting to see. But he looked comfortable underneath it. He looked good with balls that were bad, and he put them away. So it's going to be quite interesting to see whether they will fast track a guy whose technique looks like it can stand up to the rigors of Test cricket. Well, compared to all the others, then we always sit here complaining about Carl Verena's technique and everything else. Well, it's worked for him, but it's not something you want for Test cricket, and it's found him out. Aiden Markram similarly. So those are the things. Like if you have a guy like Jordan Hermann, surely he should be considered even for like an SAA tour where we play 4-day cricket or something like that, just to kind of push him into setup.
Well, last week the guys that we said that needed to up their game and score runs and to put themselves in a plane, Janima Malan and Carl Verena answered that call this week. They answered the call. And we wanted some young up and coming guys. Jordan Hermann is that young and up and coming guy who we will get into it. Who could have been on that plane. I think on talent alone, on that innings alone, as I say, against guys that have played for South Africa and South Africa A in Hardest Verloon and Sean van Berg, you saw the way he played those two. You saw the way he took Hardest apart at times. Hardest likes to bang it in short, and Hermann loves it short, both on the offside and on the leg side. So it was no skill of his bat if the balls were going to be pitching short and with real pace, which they were. The fact that he was able to play the way he did in the attacking manner that he did tells me this boy is a serious talent.
Yeah, no, he is. We've got one more Test series before we go to the World Test Championship final, and I say we go because, guys, we can't. We need to get there somehow. But anyway, and so that's going to be quite interesting to see if Australia becomes horrible, if they're going to try be risky, take that risk and give it to a guy like Jordan Hermann, because kid, like I know it's just one innings, and I think everyone's going to be like it's one innings. If he can consistently put these things together, there's no reason why they shouldn't take him out. But just based on the eye test alone, over all the other guys. I think this guy has the thing. I think with Calvary, you kind of saw there were moments where you're like, okay, dude, if the ball starts to swing, you find yourself in trouble. Guys were bowling short to Kyle, and Kyle was just dispatching people to all parts. Guys were over pitching it where you don't even need to move your feet, but when the ball starts moving around, you kind of need that. And I think maybe Jordan shows that. But let's see. Let's see. There were Division 2 matches, Tim. I just want to run quickly through those. The Northern Cape Heat beat out the Eastern Cape Lanyati. They scored 408, and the Lanyati just got the 135 and the 165. Rivaldo Munsami, who used to play for the Titans last year, he was dropped down to the Division 2. He scored 148. But outside of Marco Murray and Dodd, there wasn't much apart from the fact that it was, I think, Van Dijk took 3 wickets in that first innings, and Andrew Rasimene, who used to play for the Titans but has been playing for the Northern Cape Heat for the last 2 years, he took 6 for 40. Northern Cape Heat just putting on just keep on giving themselves the credentials to move up, Tim.
Yeah, this wasn't a surprise. This is the result that you expected. Even the margin of the win is not a surprise. This Northern Cape Heat, I do think they're not as good as they were last year. Understandable with the losses that they've had in Evan Jones and company. But it was as you say, it was efficient without being spectacular. They got the job done. Munsami will be delighted with those runs, and as you say, they have got 1 foot in terms of promotion for next season.
Yeah, but we'll see that throughout the year. And then Mpumalanga played Limpopo in the other Division 2 game this weekend. Mpumalanga winning by 9 wickets. Some interesting numbers. Ruben Hermann, who is, I don't know if they're related to Jordan Hermann, but anyway. But the big number there was Cesar Masondo scoring 158. Cesar Masondo has been with the Titans. He's played for the Easterns, and it's good to see him get some runs under his belt for Limpopo. That innings kind of helped Limpopo win that, and then obviously, it's just a situation where Mpumalanga were always going to be a little step slower than the rest. But this was a battle of the two newer provinces, you could say so, and somehow Limpopo pulling through in that game.
Yeah, a hammer play from Mpumalanga. They're now, both those teams now got first class status, so this is now officially first class game for them. It wasn't last season. This will be a huge disappointment from Mpumalanga. Two sides, they would have wanted to win that. And the turning point there was when they got the runs on the board with Mpumalanga, they had Limpopo 92 for 6. Over 100 behind, and then, as you say, Basunda came on, and he did a best of 157. It's his best score in his career, and that changed the mood. That changed the intensity within the Mpumalanga ranks. You can see they were deflated, and they just couldn't come back from that. That was a turning point for them. So Limpopo will be delighted. Mpumalanga less so.
Not so much, yeah. And I think for them, that's their level of competition. If you look at it, Division 2, because they're the two newbies, they're not necessarily attached to like established franchises. So it makes it a little bit like you obviously against Inland, you expect them to not to lose. Against Border, you'd be like, okay, no, they would struggle against them. Even against the Northern Cape Heat, I forget the last other province, but the Badgers, the Garden Route Badgers, were Southwestern districts as well. So you kind of felt like this was like I don't want to say basement dwellers match, but it was, and Limpopo came out the winner, and so Mpumalanga is going to effectively take the wooden spoon unless if things happen. Cool. Now let's move on to the bigger issue. I know we've made people wait 24 minutes, but it's time. It's time.
It's worth it. It's worth it. We promise.
I'll put a link to say it's 24 minutes in Proteas Squad to Australia. The squad's out. I'm going to put the squad out. I'm going to talk about a couple of the changes of the squad. First things first. Dean Alga Temba returns from injury. Gerald Coetzee is now selected into the squad as the bowling, as a bowling option. You then have Tennis de Bruin returning as well from a 2-year. Tennis de Bruin last played in the Sri Lanka series, and that was the series before Mark Barcher took over as Test coach. So he's now coming back into the setup. Ryan Rickleton is injured. They've brought in Heino Klaassen. They said Ryan Rickleton's injured with an ankle injury. However, don't be surprised to see Ryan Rickleton playing for the Lions. Word from Victor Mpitsang is that he was not cleared by the CSM, by the Proteas medical staff, but the Lions are taking a risk in playing him. He's got an ankle injury. Much of the same characters. Kazondo still makes it in. Rasif van der Dissen comes back in. The name that is glaring out of all of this is Aiden Markram missing out. We'll talk about that. But for our listeners, our audio listeners, Dean Alga's captain, Temba Bavuma, Gerald Coetzee, Jonas de Bruin, Sadal Alvia, Simon Harmer, Marco Jansen, Heino Klaassen, Keshav Maharaj, Lungingiti, Anuk Nokia, Kagiso Rabada, Glenton Steedman, Rasif van der Dissen, Kyle Verena, and Kazondo. Tim, what do you make of this? Who's missing out?
This was a squad where it's given you surprises. It is given you surprises. A lot of people are saying on social media it's the same old. This is not the same old. For me, I don't see Boucher picking Tennis de Bruin for the squad. That's just not happening. That's not happening. For example,
Even Gerald Coetzee.
Even if I don't think he's picking Gerald either. Klaassen makes sense, 100%. Gerald Coetzee makes sense. Gerald Coetzee makes sense because of the extra.
Let's talk about that.
But let me just just go on.
Mm-hmm. No, what I was gonna say was Gerald of the last season, right? Averaged 35. He wasn't bowling at his best. The only other reason, and to a certain extent, I get the argument that you need pace, and I understand you need someone who can crank it up, right? But isn't that an Othniel Bartman? And that's my only thing. I sat there going, I get the whole pace argument. I just think his numbers just don't give me what we need. And so my issue was, could we not have gone for someone else who could give you, who can crank it up like that?
Okay, so the last Ashes series in England took Broad, Anderson, Wokes, the slower version of the Overtons, and they took Mark Wood. Mark Wood was the only genuine fast bowler in that squad. They lost 4-0. They lost 4-0 because they were failed in both departments, batting and bowling, but to a large extent they didn't have an X factor beyond Wood. That was the problem. If you go to Australia, the teams that win in Australia have 2 or 3 genuine fast bowlers. That's how you beat Australia. You don't beat Australia by picking 2 spinners. You don't beat Australia by picking English medium pace seamers like Darren Stevens. You beat Australia by fighting fire with fire. Gerald Coetzee's numbers do not give him the right to be in there. His pace does. His genuine scary pace, which we saw in the T20 Challenge, different format I get, but you saw there, he's bowling with rhythm, he's bowling with purpose, and he's bowling with genuine pace. With Rabada, with Nokia, with Jansen, we now have a 4-pronged attack with Lungi slightly behind. So that's 5 genuine, what you would call fast bowlers. Right arm, fast bowlers. It is the right selection. There is nobody in the setup at the moment, or just beyond. Bartman isn't quick enough. Sir Pamela isn't quick enough.
Berger?
Patterson isn't quick enough.
No, the date is not. Andre Berger.
Berger is just come back from injury. He's probably just about quick enough, but he's just come back from injury. Are you going to take him on a full long tour of Australia? In the same way, are you going to take a you're not taking Ryan Rickleton, who has an injury concern for the same reason. You're not going to pick a guy who is a slight injury concern.
Okay.
If he had a season behind him, fair enough, then you could make a possible argument. I would still pick Gerald, but you could make an argument within that. That's why. So I see the solution, and I actually agree with the Coetzee inclusion.
Okay. So from a batting perspective, Tennis De Bruin comes in largely because Keegan Peterson is out. Does that mean Tennis walks into the 11, Tim?
Not 100%, but I think so. I think he goes in for Keegan at number 3. He said before, when he was dropped, just before he dropped, he said, I want to make number 3 my spot. Now, he didn't, and he wasn't able to do that for a range of reasons, but that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to make number 3 his spot. This is a second chance for him. So for me, he gets in. I don't agree with this decision. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Victor said, I heard him say that he is looking for experience. That batting lineup has got a fair amount of experience. Maybe not at international level, but it's got a fair amount of experience in terms of age. Okay. I don't agree with this. Also, if you're looking at Tennis De Bruin, last year's numbers, he averaged 25 with 100, and 2 seasons ago he averaged 25. Last season it was 42, but that went up to 42 with one of his hundreds. Take away that 100, in the next 5 innings, he made 69 runs in those 5 innings. This does not make sense to me, this selection. He talked about the fact he'd done well for South Africa A as well. The last time he played South Africa A in the longer format was 3 years ago.
Yeah, he didn't play against India.
He didn't play against India. So,
yeah,
he hasn't... doesn't make sense.
I think for me, that was the one I was like, okay, he's back. Okay. It feels knee-jerkish. It feels as though they're trying to right some sort of wrong. In the fact that Tennis was, I felt, unfairly dropped back then when Bacha came in. But the other thing is, the other alternative is bringing Aiden in. But I think Victor Mpitsang in his press conference spoke about Tennis's experience having played, because obviously with KP out, bringing somebody else who was new. Let's say you brought Janneman Malan into the setup, right? Which I think he should have gone. They should have gone that way. You would have had guys who were inexperienced in playing international cricket. I think Tennis was on the last tour of Australia, even though he didn't play. And so you kind of, I think they went kind of that way. So it kind of feels like the selectors were looking, and it looked bare, and it was either we take Janneman or we take because they spoke of Aiden, and this is what I want to get to. Aiden got dropped, and they said he was being rested to try and find his form back again. And that, what do you make of that in light of you saying that Tennis didn't come in, and who else would you have put in instead of Tennis?
Well, this is the thing. Why we're playing the series? We're playing the series to guarantee ourselves in that World Test Championship final. This is like a final. This is the final in itself. We need to win this, make a statement, get to that final, and win it. This is when you do a stopgap. This is the ideal place where you go, Keegan is injured, let's get a stopgap in. So, my candidates are, obviously we'll put Malan aside. We've said that before. Last season they averaged 64. They don't want to go that way. That's fine. For me, Peter Malan. Peter Malan, average 120. Okay, slightly inflated because of the not outs, but he was right up there. I think he was the leading run scorer. And I say this, he has been batting at 4 for Middlesex. Not batting at 4 for Poland, but he has been batting it for Middlesex when he plays over in England. So he's got experience of batting in that middle order. The other guy averaged 51 last year. He made 91 this week. Again, it's a little bit old, but if he's good enough, he's good enough. Stean van Zyl. Stean van Zyl is another guy who has been you can feel a bit hard done by when he did play for the Proteas. There's two guys with a lot of experience all around the world, have played for South Africa. They know the system. They know what it's about. They can both play in the middle order. One's a left-hander, one's a right-hander, so you can mix mix it up there in terms of where you want to bat. Those are the for me would have been they would have been. Twitter would have been a bit weird, but I
have kept Aiden if you're looking for a stopgap.
No, I wouldn't have kept Aiden. As we have discussed many times before, Aiden's mentally is fuzzled. Mentally is done for. Talent-wise, yeah, no problem. I would not be picking Aiden for the series. I would have said to Peter and Stead, I said, boys, we want to win this series. We want you to come in, have a good tour. We know you're good players. We know you can do it. You're going to bat in the middle order where you like to bat. And you guys, we know you can bat there. I think that those would have been they would have been surprising options as well for Australia. I think Australians would have gone and been very surprised by that. You want to catch Australia off guard? Those are the sorts of things that you do. Australia love to catch us off guard with their selections. We need to flip it back onto them. Yeah.
Tim, before we let's move on. From a bowling perspective, obviously you've got Marco, you've got thingy. But last time we played, and I think Stuart Hess mentioned this in the presser, South Africa went with 7 batters when we played in Australia and we won that Test series. Is Marco Jansen going to be considered a batter, and how disappointed must Van Mulder feel by not being selected?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because Australia, you can do this. Australia, you can do it in Australia. You can go the 7 batsmen, and you can have your three. You can actually have four. Yeah, or you can have 4 quicks. You know, if it's not if it's really fast and bouncy, and it really looks like it's not going to turn and have any, you could say go the full pace man. And with South Africa's brittle problems with the batting, it might be an option. I'm allergic to do it, but it might well be an option. The other point you made, what was the other point?
Van Mulder. So you got Marco Jansen in there as an all-rounder.
Yeah.
Van Mulder missing out?
Yeah, look. Yeah, he can feel a little bit unlucky. He's obviously been asked to go and score runs in the winter. He's done that. He's gone and he's scored runs in the winter. All 3 formats. He's backed that up. He scored runs at the T20 Challenge, so he's in form. Different format, but he is in form. He is looking good with the bat. Slightly surprised. I thought because he's our. We've kind of said to Aiden, you're no longer our golden child. Vian is. It's kind of been Vian has always been there. He's always been either on the edge or in the squad. Always been. We know he's good enough. We just wait for him to do it with the bat. He's now done it with the bat. He's done it, and he's done it with in different formats as well. So
he would have been a nice number 7. He would have been a nice number 7 option, 5th bowler, and then you could have gone the route of Kagiso, Anrich, or Marco with Keshav. As your 3, or even Lungi somewhere in there, because I don't want to disrespect Lungi, but everyone in Australia is so afraid, is so enamored with how fast can you bowl, whereas Lungi is still good enough and he can still crank it up if he needs to, but obviously not as much as the others. So that was what I was looking at. I was like, okay, so your number 7 is Marco going to be your number 7, and then you're going to trust him to score the runs as a seventh batter who can bowl as a fifth bowler, and then you're going to go with Anna KG Lungi, and then one of Maharaj and Hamid, depending on Keshav's injury. So that's how this looks to me. But the alternative of Marco either comes out the squad, or I don't think they'll drop Marco. So Marco probably goes down 1-8, and the question is between. Then the answer is actually Lungi effectively drops out if they want to keep Marco, but essentially it's a question of Lungi or Marco. But I think they might lean to Marco, and then obviously you have Kazondo in there as a seventh batter, and so you'll have Arvia, Elga,
Titus.
Tienis, Rassi, Temba, Verena, and I think I've left someone out.
No,
Yes,
you're right. There were six.
Yes.
And
So
then
Timber's at 5. 6 would be Zondo. Verena would bat at 7, and then you'd have Marco, Anrich, Kagiso, and Keshav, and it fits your transformation targets because then Lungi is out for effectively Kazondo. So I think that could be an 11 that I'd like to see going forward. But I'm cognizant of the fact that Lungi's bowled better than Anrich in the longer format, and I think that's why Gerald is there. It's just a worry that Anrich might not just be on point, but he was the best bowler in T20 at the World Cup right now, so it could translate into that. So for me, the selection actually comes around that whole: do you play a seventh batter going into Australia, and I'd be more comfortable, which is why a Vian Mulder would have made a little bit more sense to come into the squad just for that. I might need a fifth bowler because we've traveled to Australia 2 out of the 3 times we've gone to Australia over the last 12 years. Jacques Callis has always been there and we've been fine. The only time he wasn't there, we had JP Dwumini, who could come on as your spinner and you could still have your 4 paces. So that's something that I'm trying to wrap my head around. In terms of, do we have enough, unless we're going to be calling guys from South Africa, because Aiden, in as much as Aiden's bad, Mark used his bowling as a little bit of a stick, but he's never going to be in there. But for me, Vian was the guy. Vian's your key. You don't have that out-and-out all-rounder. Everyone's going to say Marco's that all-rounder, and currently in international cricket, Marco averages more than Vian, which is awesome, and I love it, but he's not your number 7. He can be your number 7, but in Australia, with the way those pitches are working out, I'd be very uncomfortable having him at 7. I'd love him at 8. I think he's the world's best 8. And it makes us look a lot stronger, even with. But because it's a new era, and it feels like it's a new era, Tim, do you think they'll go 7-4?
Be interesting. I think they probably will. Because we don't have to win the series. So I think we might revert back to conservative approach, get to 300, bowl them out. That's not necessarily what we're going to do. I think that we could make 150 on a consistent basis.
That's my worry.
Yeah, it's my worry.
But so for my biggest worry is the Sardal Dean Alga axis and how deep Timber bats. Timber can't bat at 5; he needs to bat at 4. But where does Rassi fit in if you have tennis? Because you kind of feel like tennis and Rassi would want to bat 3-4, and then Timber bats at 5. But I actually would want Timber to bat at 4, Rassi to bat at 5. But so my comfort in all of this is that Timber's he's having a great year in Test match.
He's fine.
He's
Timber's fine.
the best batter.
Timber's fine.
So we're bringing in our best batter that we didn't have against England. Sardal and Dean can give you 50 runs. They average around there as a partnership. So for me, if we can stifle the opening bowling, and by these two just battering down the hatches, it will give Tiernis an opportunity. It gives this batting lineup time to kind of bat in better conditions when the ball is softer, and all you need is to just, it's not moving around, it's not giving you a little bit bounce softer. It's doing whatever it needs to for it helps you as a batter. And then obviously Timber's in there. Russie's a man for all seasons. Russie's like everyone wants him out of the test side. He's still not that bad. It just
I'm worried
hasn't been
about him.
great, like
I'm worried
ODIs, but
about
it
him.
hasn't been bad.
No, I'm worried about him. I'm not going to lie. I'm worried. As I
Okay.
say, I'm not worried about Saul. I'm not worried about Elgar.
But
And I'm not worried about Timber. You're right. Those three, I'm not actually worried. It doesn't mean it's going to correlate to success, but I'm worried about Tinnis, relying on Tinnis. I don't want to have to rely on him at the moment. I worry about Russell. We've relied on him too much. This 2022 is his worst year. Average of 27. Now, I could throw you all sorts of numbers. But he looks as if he's missing something. He looks as if he's a little bit unsure of his position. It looks to me like we're hanging on to him just a little bit too long.
but who's
Like
there?
but that's the point. You don't hang on to somebody because there's nobody there. You don't
That's
do
how
that.
we've always selected teams. I remember during the Smith era, it was no one's there. But then we were like, but there's Colin Ingram, there's all of these people waiting in the wings to play, and it was no, there's an absence of talent at that lower level.
Yeah. Look, I think you're picking Hermann and Milan for the series. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking both of those guys make this for different reasons. Hermann probably not going to play. Jarman definitely going to play. I think both of those guys come into this, and Mulder. I think those three come into. Mulder probably plays. Milan plays. Hermann comes in for the experience. That's ideally what you do, and that is to take care of Russie's poor form, Keegan's injury, and as a sort of security for Reina. Hermann is the security for Reina. That is what I would be thinking along those lines. I get why they don't do it. But that's what I would have gone.
Cool. One last thing to just talk about before we go. We saw SA Cricket Magazine pull out a story that said Timber Bavuma's the reason Reza was not selected. Tim, what do you make of that whole? We wanted to trust our best 11. I'm paraphrasing here from Timber's press conference. Wanted to trust our best 11, and we didn't want to give guys a chance who would never have never experienced a World Cup spot like that, or whatever the pressure it was from the World Cup. But that's essentially what it was. What did you make of that article? What did you make of everyone assuming that it was Reza? Even though, yeah, let's go there, and then I'll close out and we'll close the show.
Clickbait.
Yeah.
Clickbait article. Simple as that. Clickbait article. Let's just put a bunch of few quotes together and make something that's going to get people outraged. That's all I will say.
Look, because so today's presser with Victor Bitang, they asked him that question around Reza's selection, and so it initially was around Shamsi. Shamsi says he never got the support from him and Mark, which is true because Shamsi's the better bowler than Keshav in T20s, but it's just a Mark thing. Like that's how I see Keshav's selection in T20. It's a Mark thing. It's out of left field. I think there were better T20 bowlers there apart from his economy rate. He just never took wickets. England wanted to take wickets from ball 1 to ball 120. But with Reza, he spoke about Reza and he mentioned that he did have a conversation with Reza, and the problem with Reza was that Timber's captain, and yes, they would have wanted Timber to contribute a lot more with the bat, but the captaincy in itself required a player, and his leadership on and off the field was really important to this team's success or non-success, but the way they saw it. And so essentially that's what it was. And so it was actually quite interesting to listen to that. And I was like, yeah, but that we've known that. Mark spoke about that. Mark said that even against Zimbabwe, that Timber's our captain, and it's unfortunate for Reza. It truly was unfortunate. And that's what it is. But I don't think we could, I don't know, because we've never had that before. Had Graham Smith been off form before World Cup and there was a Colin Ingram waiting in the wings to play, even Jacques Callis towards the end of the tournament, Colin Ingram was hanging around and Jacques wasn't, but you're not going to drop a guy like that or even your captain. So, yeah, I just don't know. I just don't think we've ever had a situation like that.
All I will say is England. England, Aaron Morgan. England press loved Aaron Morgan. They ate out of the palm of his hands. They absolutely took everything that he said as the Holy Grail. Not that it was, but that's how he was. He was extremely highly thought of as a captain on and off the field. When the situation of Alex Hales was bad for the environment, they went along with him. Morgan didn't want him. Morgan didn't want Alex Hales for a range of reasons of discussions that he made. Look what happened. Aaron Morgan was the bigger man, saw his form dip, said, you know what, my form is dipping, I'm not producing the goods, I'm going to step down. England went along with that. They brought Alex Hales into the squad, and he played a large part in that T20 World Cup win. A large part. I'm just saying,
but
I'm not saying that things are exactly the same. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is, we think very highly of Timber, rightly so. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be there for 2023. I'm not saying either what should happen. I'm just saying.
Oh, you're looking for it.
I'm just saying, looking forward.
Yes, because Owen Morgan had a horrible World Cup with the last year.
Horrible.
And so but that's obviously, well, those discussions haven't happened, but that's essentially what kind of needs to happen in terms of the discussions going forward. How we, like I said, we need in a shorter format of the game, we need to figure out how we want to play and play that way, and go with that. Mark went with the conservative approach. Aggression is how you win games now in T20. So Timber doesn't fit that mold for that. And then also you just got to figure out who's going to be captain. Nick, you're going to have to figure that out. Someone has to shoulder the burden, and go for it. And let's see how it goes. But for this tournament, that's what happened. They stuck with their captain. And Owen Morgan didn't retire during the World Cup last year. He retired.
After it.
So England also went through the pain of why is Morgan there. Even the whole Steve Smith. I remember last year we were talking about why is Steve Smith playing, and Steve Smith played the entire World Cup for Australia, and then all of a sudden now Steve Smith's in the squad, but he's sitting on the bench. That's the type of things that happen. And so I think we just need to not say that we're like the only team where captains don't resign. Like, which captain resigns in the World Cup? Aaron Finch. Aaron Finch looked like an embarrassment. It wasn't like, oh, look at Australia. It was just an embarrassment. I was like, okay,
Kenny Williamson.
Your captain's wearing a bib. Like, what is this? So, but that's just me. Outside of that, Tim, everybody, all the best to the Proteas. They'll be going soon to the World Cup. We've got fixtures coming up in the CSA 4 days, so we're just going to put those up, and I'm going to read them out for our audio listeners. The Momentum Titans, Multiply Titans play the Knights in Centurion on Thursday at 10 a.m. Northwest Dragons play the DP World Lions back in Botch on Wednesday. Hopefully there's no rain for these two games because, it'd be very interesting. The G-Bets Warriors play the Dolphins. They've won their first game in this season, so they're top of the log. They play the Dolphins who haven't played a game. They play them in Gqeberha. And then it's the Western Cape Derby, Six-Gun Grill Western Province against the G-Bets Rocks at Newlands. Tim, you'll be at that game. Looking forward to seeing those youngsters put up their hand. And Jordan Hermann and Gqeberha, if there's something to watch, if there's a game to watch, it's that Dolphins and Warriors. I'd like to see Jordan Hermann go up against Bartman Dupavilon and Penelin Subrian this weekend. And there'll be some Proteas floating around here and there. So do watch out for them. I think Aiden might make an appearance based on what was happening today. outside of that, yeah, everybody, Tim, have a nice day, and have a great week. And unless some drama comes up, we're gonna talk about it. Outside of that, have a good week. Goodbye, and le sale kakahiso.